For centuries, Western science and philosophy have wrestled with the nature of the self. We talk about the brain, the physical organ, and the mind, the non-physical functional product of that organ, as in our thoughts, memories, and emotions. And then we often set something else entirely apart, the spirit or soul. This split or this dualism suggests the spiritual self is separate from the physical machinery of the body. But what if this distinction is fundamentally flawed? What if the separation of spirit, mind, and body is a cultural invention? So in today's second part of going into the question of where spirit fits in with brain and mind, we're journeying beyond the typical Western neuroscientific paradigm to find answers. We'll explore profound and ancient wisdom from cultures that view the self not as divided, but as an integrated energy system. We're traveling to Polynesia, to China, and to India to see how their maps of the self might change the way we think about our own consciousness, and to understand better how brain, mind, and spirit are interwoven and integrated. So let's dive into one of the most ancient and profound questions in human experience. Where does the concept of spirit fit in with our modern understanding of the brain and the mind? In a Western, scientifically oriented context, we often treat the brain as the seat of the mind, and spirit is often relegated to religion or philosophy, a separate and often very abstract concept. But what if the brain, mind, and spirit are not separated? What if other cultures have a more integrated view? And to try and find some answers to those questions, we're going to travel the world to explore how ancient traditions have grappled with this very relationship of brain, mind, and spirit, offering incredibly rich and distinct models of the self. But before we go on our journey, let's set the stage. Let's quickly review the common Western view. The prevailing scientific model is monism, which in plain English means that the mind is what the brain does. Though historically, dualism, i.e. the mind and soul are separate from the body, used to dominate. The brain is the physical organ, a biological machine of neurons and chemicals. The mind is the functional product of the brain that gives us thoughts, emotions, and the consciousness. And spirit or soul are generally non-physical, eternal, a theological or purely philosophical concern that is often disconnected from the body's daily mechanisms in this view. And now let's turn to cultures where the spiritual and physical are not so easily cleaved. Our first stop on the journey to other cultures today is the vast expanse of the Pacific, where the core concepts of Hawaiian and Polynesian culture offer a model of interconnected spiritual energy. A vital concept there is mana. Mana is a supernatural or spiritual power that can be possessed by people, by objects, and by places. It is a spiritual energy and a universal life force. It is not just in the individual, it flows through the environment. And the tie to mind and body means that a person with great mana isn't just physically strong, they have authority, wisdom, and spiritual power. Their presence or spirit is strong. It's an internal state directly influencing their external life and perceived authority. Then there's the concept of aloha aina, the love of the land. This concept reflects that deep spiritual connection to the natural world. The land is sacred and imbued with mana. The human-spirit relationship isn't just internal, it is ecological. Our spirit thrives when we live in harmony with the environment and ancestors. And the aumakua, the ancestors, play a big role as well. The spirits of deceased relatives remain active, acting as personal deities, healers, and guides. And this suggests that the individual spirit is part of a larger intergenerational continuum, making the concept of self and mind less isolated or purely individual. I should maybe add here that the words of mana, aloha aina, and aumakua are more the Hawaiian words. In other corners of the Polynesian area, the words may slightly different because the languages of different islands, they kind of seem to be able to understand each other, but there are differences. It's sometimes a bit like dialects or accents. So the Polynesian or Hawaiian view suggests that spirit is a dynamic, shared and permeating energy that dictates a person's power and well-being, directly linking the self to the land and the ancestors. Our next stop is China, and we look to traditional Chinese medicine, which is often abbreviated to TCM. TCM has an incredibly sophisticated physiological map for the spirit, often called Shen. The body is not a container for the single soul, but a vessel for 5 distinct spirits or facets of the soul. Before I go into the different facets of the soul, there are also the 3 treasures that are part of TCM, which means that the body is governed by Jing, the essence, Qi, as we know it from Qigong, the vital energy, and the Shen, and that's the spirit. The 5 Shen or Wu Shen is the key model where the spiritual and the mental faculties are tied to specific major organs or the yin organs. So let's look at those 5. The Shen is the emperor spirit stored in the heart, the supreme consciousness, thought, reasoning, memory, and presence. This is the light behind the eyes. When the heart Shen is disturbed, you get symptoms we recognize as anxiety, insomnia, and an inability to focus. Then we've got Hun, the eternal soul that is stored in the liver. It governs planning, dreams, creativity, and the ability to bring ideas to fruition. It gives movement to the Shen. Then there's the Po, the corporeal soul that's stored in the lungs. It governs physical sensation, knee-jerk reactions, and the life force connected to breath. It keeps us grounded in the present. The next one is the Yi, the intellect or spirit mind that is stored in the spleen. It governs applied thinking, concentration, and the capacity to generate memory and sustain intentions. And the last of the 5 is the Ji, which is the willpower stored in the kidneys. And that governs courage, drive, endurance, and the capacity to adapt to stress. This model might seem a little bit alien to us in the West, but it is a remarkable integration. The Chinese model doesn't ask, where does spirit fit? It states that spirit is already an inseparable, multifaceted, functional aspect of the body and mind, with each aspect tied to an organ system. Mental illness, for instance, isn't just a brain problem, but a disturbance of the Shen in the heart, which must be treated via that specific organ's balance. And finally, let's explore the classical Indian philosophical schools like Vedanta and Samkhya Yoga, where the idea of the self is vast and eternal. So India is our last stop on our journey. And these classical philosophies of yoga and Vedanta introduce a concept of spirit that is transcendental, existing beyond the physical. Here, the core term is Atman, which is often translated as the immortal self or the soul. In many schools like the Advaita Vedanta, for example, Atman is considered the individual soul that is identical with Brahman, which is the ultimate universal reality. Tied to mind and body is that the individual mind, also called manas, and the intellect, also called buddhi, are seen as part of the material world, which is called prakriti, like the body. The Atman is the witness consciousness that observes the working of the mind and body. Then we have Purusha, the pure consciousness or the universal spirit. In the Samkhya Yoga dualism, Purusha is the eternally conscious, unchanging, non-material aspect. It is the seer or the knower. It is absolute, independent, and separate from Prakriti, being the material world, which includes the mind. So what is the relationship? The individual's state of being, i.e. their spirit, is defined by whether they mistakenly identify with their mind, in this case the Prakriti, being the thoughts, the emotions and ego, or if they realize their true nature as Atman or Purusha, which is the pure witnessing consciousness. The goal of yoga is essentially to clear the modifications of the mind to fully realize the spirit, which is eternal, unchanging, and already whole. The Indian model presents a radical split. Spirit is transcendental. It is pure consciousness, separate from the brain and the operational mind. Yet the realization of this truth is the ultimate function of the mind-spirit relationship. Now let's synthesize all this, what we found out from the 3 stops on our journey. The ancient world offers us 3 incredibly rich models where spirit is not just a theological afterthought, but a core component of existence. We have traveled from the holistic communal energy of mana in Polynesia, of which Hawaii is a part, to the organ-based, integrated, functional spirituality of the Five Shen in China, to the transcendent, pure witnessing consciousness of Atman or Purusha in India. In Polynesia, spirit is a shared environmental and ancestral energy that gives life and authority. In China, spirit is an integrated physiological function with mental and spiritual health directly tied to the balance of internal organs. And in India, spirit is a transcendental, unchanging self, distinct from the ever-changing mind and body, which the mind must strive to perceive. Each of these traditions rejects the simple Western separation They force us to consider that mental health, vitality, and even personality are direct measures of our spiritual integration. They challenge neuroscience to look for connections not just within the skull, but between the individual, their environment, and a larger dynamic energy system. The key takeaway is that for a significant portion of humanity, spirit is not an optional abstract concept, but an essential component of mental and physical health and function. A question that might be worth further exploring is, which map offers the most insight for the future of brain and mind science? And that brings us to the end of the episode of Exploring Brain and Mind. If you haven't already subscribed or followed, please follow on Apple and Spotify, Amazon Music and YouTube. Share the episode with people who might be interested and download the episode as well, as downloads are very important for us podcasters. I hope you tune in again to one of the future episodes, and I am grateful for your time to listen. Thank you.